We'll call the meeting to order. We do have, now I have to count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're still good. Okay. I'm sorry. I've had the worst brain today. I'll start. We can go whatever direction. Kelly Tarville.
Dave Martin. Wayne Millington.
Jen Polkey.
We've got public Dave back here. Give him an honorary mention. All right. Approval of agenda. Any additions or deletions? No. Approval of the minutes over 9. It's so long ago.
We always get good minutes.
All right. I don't think I had any, even though it feels a million years ago.
Kelly Amber has her hand up.
Sorry, thank you. I can't see any hands.
Sorry. So I noticed in the minutes of the October 9th meeting, it says approving the minutes of the August 14th meeting. So that was 100% my error, and it should say approving the minutes of the September whatever date that was.
Okay, September
11th.
Yeah, okay. Anything else anybody noticed? No. All right, so.
I do.
Oh,
Hi. I noticed that the spellings of the two potential board members are is not accurate in the minutes. It's not consistent with the names on the letters that were submitted, the spelling.
where are you looking, Julie? Oh, I see it under page 1, administrators.
Yeah.
Third line, kind of in the middle, Katie Benson's.
Yeah, it look on the letter, it was spelled with a K and a Y. And then the other board member, Katie Klichkowski, I don't believe that's how you spell her last name.
I can tell you.
We received 2 letters for our review this week, and so that's why I noticed that the spelling was inconsistent.
All right, so we'll get the correct spellings for those here shortly.
Do you want Klichkowski?
Yeah, if you have it ready, yes.
Yeah. Katie Klichkowski is Katie, and Klichkowski is Klecczkowski.
Did you hear that, Amber?
I did, yes, thank you.
And then Caitlin Benson, I do think is Katy. Kat. Yeah, if you have it. If I start switching screens, I'll get all sorts of lost.
Kaitlyn.
Kaitlyn. There we go. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So with those changes, the date and the correct spellings of Katie and Katie, do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from October 9th?
So moved.
Thank you. Second? Thank you. Everybody, oh my God, I really should do this tonight. Just go. It's been a long day. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right. I can't see everybody on the big screen lane, so if something happens that I need to know, please tell me. All right. Board comments. Nothing. All right. Public comments. Anybody in the virtual public or the real public?
I don't see any hands. Speech.
And that brings us to administrator's report.
Superintendent, hey. So I had sent around a written report. We talked a little bit about, in the written report, I'll try to hit up what is happening in and around the state. And that was a very high-level, broad overview of the PICUS report, which is one of the pieces of data that the commission is looking at to make its recommendations to the state about education funding. And I think it's kind of important to dig into the details of that a little bit. And so I'll talk about a couple of them tonight, because a lot of them go along with the themes that we've talked about in terms of, the levers to pull to fix education funding. So what the report is it's basically a mega study. They would go out and look at particular things like, what is the impact of an effective preschool on school budgets? And they'd reach out to the research base and they'd look at whatever research studies were out there. They'd read them and then they pull the common themes out of them and say, this is probably reliable and it seems to correlate pretty well. So what's nice about the report is that I think it's kind of foreshadowing for us, if we look at the details, where things are headed over the next couple of years as they try to redo the education funding system. So in terms of preschools, it is recommending full-day preschool classrooms. What they got from doing the meta study on that research was the idea that for every dollar spent on a preschool student, it saves $18 as they go through the course of their their education. They did a lot of research on core class sizes. I'm not sure how applicable it is to Vermont. They looked at elementary and said, it should be capped at 15 students, and then they looked at a lot of that was looking at kind of the national averages. I don't think it really looked too hard at what the academic impact was of those sizes. The one thing that did come out of it, which was interesting, and this is something that we've talked about when we said one of the levers that the state is able to pull to try to kind of help out with people's taxes and correct what's happening with the education fund is consolidation of the smaller schools. That is one of the things that they're probably going to push for. So what the research was saying when they took a look at it is that at the elementary level, elementary schools with 400 to 600 kids tend to perform better than schools that are larger or smaller than that. And then for secondary education, it's 500 to 1,000 is what they found to be the optimal range. Again, it's just looking at school performance and looking at size, and there's a correlation with those sizes. They took a look at the correlation between the conditions of a school and student performance, and it was mixed. The ones that showed that there was no correlation, there may have been some bias in there, right? Because if there's a correlation, the pressure is going to be to spend taxes to rebuild schools, things like that. And so based upon the states that they were from, there was probably a little bias in there. Some of the studies, about half of them found that there were a fairly good correlation between the quality of the facilities that is had in a district and how students are performing. And the things that they pointed out most specifically were just a new building, well-maintained building, thermal regulation to avoid excessive temperatures, which kind of makes sense, appropriate lighting levels, and limiting external noise. And there were a couple of other recommendations that have been kind of floating around. One of them is this idea that to help relieve people's taxes a little bit, the legislature has got to stop using the education fund to fund other projects. They tapped into it for the universal free meals, which is fine. People deserve to eat. But instead of finding another source of funding for that, when they voted it in, they instead tapped into the education fund to fund it. The other piece that they're tapping into the fund for is teacher retirement. They never properly funded teacher retirement for years and years and years. And so what they've been doing is they've been taking money out of the education fund to fund it. And so that all costs the taxpayers more, and it is not going directly into your schools, which is supposedly what you're paying taxes for. So that was one of their first recommendation. They also recommended very strongly that they need other inputs into the education fund, that they need money coming in from other sources. So instead of just property taxes, what other taxes are out there that could help kind of bolster this so that it's not all coming from people's property taxes. And so those were kind of the broad overview of the specifics within that report. In addition, here, we're going to talk about this a little bit when we hit on the budget. Some of the work that's happening right now is kind of related to the continuous improvement plans and the school board's goals for the district. And that's we're getting ready to pilot a new teacher evaluation process. The union has been on board, and we're going to pilot it for this year. The real focus of it is to take those big goals that the district have, make sure that the teachers, as they're setting their goals, are in alignment with it, and making sure the teachers can also communicate to us the resources they need to carry out and achieve those goals in the classroom. So it's an alignment that should help us achieve the continuous improvement plan goals a little bit more speedily. Negotiations, we are currently waiting on Chris Leopold. I don't know if we've had contact with him.
He was going to get back to me.
We're trying to get dates from him because he is the hardest one to get dates for. And the union is ready to start negotiations once we have that. It's just the teachers that are up for negotiations. When we started looking through the contracts, the support staff actually have another year. So it's just that one round. And that's about it, unless there's questions on any of those parts and pieces.
After I got your email, I went back and we skimmed through the 133-page report. And as you say, it's a more nuanced report than the public presentations about it, were. But I was concerned that people would latch on to the fact, basically, well, you could reduce spending by about a third per pupil, if you had bigger classes and bigger schools and you didn't do less music and art and all those things.
Yeah.
But the other thing that worried me about that a bit was that it seemed like they wanted, or they were considering taking control away from school boards, and and saying, all right, the class sizes, they're not a maximum, they're this is how much money we'll give you, right? And not let school districts decide for themselves how they want to spend money and how much they want to spend.
Yeah. And it's an interesting system, the way that it's set up. At a high level, it kind of makes sense, but you really don't have a tremendous amount of impact locally over your local taxes. And I think people kind of saw that last year. But I think what came out of the report is you can see what they're looking at: student sizes, right? Student staff ratios, and school sizes. So we get back to that idea of the two levers to pull is, regulating student to staff ratios and forcing consolidation of the smaller schools. So again, like I said, it doesn't mean it's going to happen. It's a foreshadowing. But that's data that they've been looking at consistently from a couple of sources. The one caveat that I'll put on the research is I didn't see in the reading, and it may have just been me that missed it. But typically, when people do meta studies, they're not just looking at the research, but they're looking at the quality of the research, right? And so when they're pulling all the research about a subject together, they only look at the research studies that seem to be valid, seem to have a proper investigative technique that was used to them. And so that was not stated in there. And so, it leaves a couple questions in mind.
With the,
No, go ahead.
with the data on the preschool doing full day, and were they thinking also of doing full day 5 days or still?
Yeah.
Because that would be, from a parent's perspective, I mean, yes, it's great to save $18 per kid. Yeah, but if you have a kid in preschool 5 days, it could also save you 2 days of daycare and childcare that you got to pay for.
Yeah. It's they're pretty powerful. We built it full day for 4-year-olds, and we still do the 10 hours for the 3-year-olds. It does a couple of things. You've got a high level of special education students. One of the things it allows is for the district staff to start working with the students early and start to really pre-identify. And then we can provide resources to help kind of mitigate those issues early so that they don't develop into something bigger down the line. The other thing, the research has been clear for years that it really does give the kids a solid start, especially for the early to mid elementary grades. They tend just to perform a lot better. And so, you prepare them really well. They get their basic numeracy skills, their basic literacy skills. They're coming in prepared to learn. They've had some socialization and know how to get along in groups. It makes a big difference over time. So.
Is it also accurate to say that the report was done under a bigger umbrella than Vermont? It was national, and so those numbers are pulling from cities as well as very rural places, and causation and correlation are not always exactly as statistics point to.
You can have correlation and there's no causality.
Right.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. And if I remember, this report was done not because of the commission's work. It was just a report that was done that they're pulling in the commission's work. So it wasn't like they went out and hired the two authors. I guess I don't remember the other gentleman.
Something
to do the work. So conversation. I like the discussion. It's fun. There's a couple of hands up online.
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
Jamie, and then we'll do Julie. If there's more, I can't see them yet. There you go.
Hi. Sorry. Well,
I got my yeah.
as you're talking about the universal preschool, as a parent of a young child, and especially when we went through COVID, there was a big argument about preschools and schools are not childcare, except you're making it childcare. Parents end up relying on it as childcare, and you're not able to, then you don't have anywhere else to put them when school's closed or there's a holiday or, these half days and parent teacher conferences and service days. So then, as a parent, especially for young kids, I don't know how, that's difficult. It's just my observation on it.
Yeah, you're hitting a very good point in terms of what makes preschools successful. Typically, if there is childcare in a town, it's limited and people have to sign up. They're on a waiting list. If they get a spot and they know that they've got their childcare and that the care is going to happen year round, they're not going to give up that spot to send their student to preschool. So the most successful preschools have a couple of other components to it. They have summer programming. They still operate on school vacations. And they also have an after-school component. And the after-school component, it allows the parents to pick up their kids when work gets out because, preschool can be both, right? It can help parents out with childcare, which is one of the reasons the state is supporting it so much right now because it doesn't exist in Vermont, and also provide a good solid education and socialization for the kids. But when it's tied to the parents' schedules, you just get a lot more students that are involved. And that ends up benefiting the school in the end because you're just so much better prepared. So very, very good points. And Julie? Yeah.
My impression from the report and from your remarks is that there will be, or maybe there will be momentum toward hitting benchmarks around either class size or overall population count for elementary or high school. And my question is whether you have any insight into what statutory or regulatory processes would need to happen for that to be required for local districts. Because my impression now is that, all of these things would require local votes, but would it be true that through statute or through regulation, the state could, mandate without, a vote of the communities, those sorts of changes.
I believe so. So I'll say 95%. I'm happy to run it past legal, but I believe they can. And not only that, the state school board of education can also, even if it's not statute, can make it a regulation. And so the way that I look at it, it's rational. I don't know if it's right, is in terms of legislative process, the legislators are going to choose what's going to upset the fewest people if they can, right? Because that's how they get their votes. And so last year, what you had is the controversy that would go with shutting down small schools and consolidating has always been here. But last year, with that huge increase in taxes that people had to absorb, the controversy and the upsetness is rising and almost in parity with how upset they would be about closing the small schools. The second how upset they are about taxes goes above closing small schools, I can pretty much guarantee what they're going to do, right? And so there is the potential that crossing of those lines, those thresholds could happen this year. We'll talk a little bit about that when we get to the financial pieces, because they were estimating that if every school district in the state of Vermont level funds, there will still be a 7% increase. So if everybody spends this year what they spent last year, there's still going to be a 7% increase. And so, yeah, and so you're pushing up that other side a little bit.
Yeah. So a follow up there. So then wouldn't it also be true? It seems like there's some logical consistency in, if the state is making state level decisions about, building capacity or, head counts in classrooms, shouldn't it also be true that the state is making decisions about budget approval then rather than the boards, or excuse me, rather than the resident vote?
Yeah, and I seem to remember that being a topic of discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if it's serious, if it was serious, or if it's something they can actually do, but I do remember hearing from one of the administrative associations that was a topic of discussion way back when. That was months ago. I haven't heard much about it since.
Since what happened last year or predating that?
Yeah, like summertime-ish. And
okay.
Summer. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so good questions.
No, and I think, that rather than enacting new regulations are slow, right? Now, but what they can do quickly is make changes to the budget. Say, all right, if you have fewer than 25 kids in a class, we're not going to give you the money to pay for it, right?
Yeah, they have by legislation, they have what's called the adequate amount for a basic education. And so that's the yield. That's what everybody across the state gets per student, right? Every district gets the yield per student every year. That's how they define and how they provide you funding to make sure that every kid gets a basic education. If you need money above that, you go into what's called the risk pool. But yeah, so they do define that. That's already defined in statute, how they calculate that. Yep.
Right, but they could tweak the way each district gets money from the education fund, to penalize districts that have too few kids in a class, or have schools that are too small, or anything they wanted to tweak it from.
Yeah, they have what's called an excess spending threshold, right? And so that's kind of what that does. It tries to keep people below that threshold. So you got this pot of money that the schools gets you to here in terms of, the cash that you've got coming in to run things. That's your for basic education. Most schools can't subsist upon that. It's not enough. And so what ends up happening is they earn more money by entering the risk pool. So any district, which is pretty much everyone across the state of Vermont, needs more money, so they enter this risk pool. So what it means is that everybody who enters the risk pool, they're all paying for each other's taxes. So, here, everybody's paying for it. Here, it might not be everybody if some schools aren't in the risk pool. But if you go above the threshold value that they set on the higher limit of the risk pool, you're crossing what's called the excess spending threshold. And there's penalties that go along with that. And I believe that all that money that's above that threshold that you need is probably coming directly from your own tax figures. Don't quote me on that, but that's kind of what I remember from 1,000 years ago. But there's a penalty with it. So they've already kind of established that. It's just not as explicit as what you're saying.
Yeah, no, I mean, if they wanted to tweak it to make it more strict or penalize you more if you did certain things, even below that higher level, you know,
they changed the formula.
They can change it whenever they want to.
Yeah. They changed it last year from the weighting study. That's what caused all the turmoil.
Well, they changed it then, and then they changed it again in the springtime before they approved the budget. So
yeah, it's legislative action.
Any other questions for Lane? Nothing on Lane?
Nope.
All right. Principal's report.
Okay, I will go first. So the bus driver candidate that we have is working diligently toward getting his bus endorsement. Each time we make some progress, we find out there's a couple more hoops to jump through. So our goal was to try to get bus service established post Thanksgiving break. It'll probably be after the December break, most likely. We're still shooting for as early as we can, but given the number of hours of practice, there's a road practice test, and it's hard to find people who are qualified drivers who have enough time beyond the routes they're already driving to help train up new people. So in a nutshell, that's what the problem is there. The key wading trip was a great success. We all had a great time. It was very good community building process, as well as good academic work, and the PTG's continuing to do some fundraising. And so that was excellent. We had a fire safety program, and I want to thank our fire chief for giving us that opportunity. We came out in our grade level vans and had a chance to tour the truck and hear about fire safety procedures, and they did a really nice job. So thanks for that. This past Friday, thanks to Deb, we were able to attend a Veterans Day program, and thanks to Andrea Sanford for her organization efforts there. Our kids were able to participate as well as the audience members. Last Thursday and Friday, we had our student-led conferences, and participation level was almost 100%, just a small handful of kids that didn't present to their families, although now it's standard practice for us to have a couple of staff members, including myself, be the audience if families can't get there to work or whatever. And the quality continues to build. You can see it from preschool on up to sixth grade. Every time they do it, they're really demonstrating a real skill set in terms of curating their work, telling a story about what their challenges have been, what their successes have been, what their goals are, and next steps in their learning, sharing examples of their work. And just last night, feels like so long ago, just last night we had the school choice open house. Last year, Deb posted it in Ludlow. We were going to take turns alternating. So we had 15 choice schools with display tables and exhibits. And I would say, didn't count, but I want to say probably 40 students or so. So given the fact that our class is a little larger, yours is a little smaller, pretty good turnout and excellent feedback. People, we did a little later last year because it was the first time, and people gave us feedback that having it in November would be more helpful earlier in the process, give them more time to still go and visit and shadow with different schools. So that was great. I want to spend a little time just sharing some academic assessment data. Last month, we had said the embargo, we expected it would have been lifted on the VT cap results, and it still isn't. And I made the assumption that, of course, the state would be efficient, as it always is. So what I have prepared for you, I'm not going to give you. I will give it to you hopefully in December. I'm not going to give you the whole thing because I commingled the VT cap with the maps, but I will give you an overview and writing of the maps data and remind you of where we were and what goals we set and the progress we've made from last year.
Thank you.
Then I'll make sure to get Amber a copy of this so that she can put it in with the board minutes. So those of you that are online can have a copy yourselves. So the VT cap data that I can share is from the spring or the spring of 2023. And I'm going to focus on math and literacy because that was our real focus for our SIP goals along with social and emotional learning. So back in 2023, our math rates of students who are proficient and above were at 43%. And in literacy, proficient and above was at 56%. And if you recall in the spring when we shared our SIP plans, our goal was to try to bring math up to 55% proficient and above, and literacy up to 60% proficient and above. And so what you have with this multicolored sheet, one side is math. You can see that right under achievement overview. And the other side is literacy. And it's comparing spring of 23 to the window we just completed in the fall. And so in math, if you see this bubble here, the green circle, that's the way MAPS and NWEA aggregate all of these bars within this line. And you can see in the spring, we were at 76% proficient and above. That's the green, K to 6. And then in the fall, virtually the same, it dropped by a point, 75% proficient and above. So making good progress toward our SIP goal. And then if you flip it over and you look at the reading data, in the spring, this yellow dot is talking about a 60% proficient and above level. And this fall, we were able to get it up to 72% proficient and above. So I'm pleased with the progress, but not satisfied with, we still have longer term goals that we're striving for this spring and next spring. Right now, that's the main benchmark data that I can share with you. And then, like I said, hopefully by December, we'll be able to, and then I will give you the full sheet that summarizes both VT cap right next to all the math data just summarized. Anybody have a question?
In general, does this data in years past or whatever correlate with, I know it's changed.
Right, from SBAC to VT
Right,
cap.
but do we know how it is going to correlate or not?
You want to answer? Sure.
Well, I had spoken a little bit about this at the TRSU board, that one of the thoughts that Julie Lane and I had was to look at how that would compare with our benchmark data over time, creating a table and an analysis of that. We just haven't run the numbers yet, but that's a project that is on our to-do list to look at how that correlates over time.
Thank you.
And it'll be interesting when we do that because sometimes a student does better, like an individual student does better on one measure or the other. And sometimes your aggregate results, it's hard to tell because you're measuring year to year and you're looking at your aggregate total.
So I see that there were 76 students in the first, test and 86 in the second. And so obviously you're measuring different students. And so the question is, how much of the change is because of the different students, and how much is, if you track the same kid from one to the next?
Yeah.
Right?
That's an excellent point, Dave. And just keep in mind that this is K through 6. So the number of students we had K through 6 in the spring was lower, a little higher now.
Right, I'm saying,
But they're different.
We don't, right. So we don't know for sure how much is because the kids actually are doing better, or how much because you had different kids coming in, right?
So one of the tricky parts about presenting this sort of data, especially in small schools, is you have to protect student confidentiality. So in a setting like this, it's so public, we're erring to the side of caution. But you can rest assured, Dave, that our data teams at every grade level is looking at, okay, how did this child do this fall versus last spring versus last winter versus last fall? And we're tracking individual growth. We have student profiles that are very, very much personalized and individualistic in terms of seeing, and not just seeing literacy and math in general, but also the subcategories of numbers and operations as geometric thinking, algebraic thinking, all of the subcategories of both literacy and math. So we can see that, and we're using that data actively and each week.
Thank you.
Okay. So much of the same that Craig indicated, our student-led conferences were excellent. Our students continue to grow and share their learning and set their goals. And it's always so much fun to watch them share with their parents about their learning and taking ownership in that. This year, we had 2 half days for student-led conferences, and our teachers were able to get almost 100% participation. Thursday, we were 12 to 7, and then Friday, we were 12 to 3, which really helped support our larger class sizes in getting those conferences in. During our student-led conferences, we began collecting some data with a family feedback survey, and I'll share that with you. I've gotten a handful back, but I sent some home. I'm going to put it in my weekly newsletter to go out to families, and it's just really giving us some feedback about how we're doing as a school. And I'll share that data out once I have all of that information back. I'd like to share more than a handful. Hopefully I'll get more back. Again, Andrea Sanford came and organized Veterans Day Assembly. We had students from Mount Holly, Ludlow, and the Expeditionary School participating in the presentation, along with some local veterans that presented. It was a great opportunity to bring the school and the community together. Hopefully we can continue to do that as we move forward. Ditto on the Key Waden trip. We also had a fire safety assembly, and thank you to the Ludlow Fire Department for coming out and bringing the trailer and the truck, and our kids did a rotation through and got to see what that was all about. PTG and local donations will cover all of our winter sports program for all of our students, so they'll cover rentals along with the program fees. So we're very grateful to have local donations and the PTG support in that. PTG is also scheduled an assembly in December with the Junkman Band, which is a lot of fun. So that'll happen that week before our break. Ted Knassi is partnering with an organization, and I can't remember the name of the organization, to bring skateboarding into the PE curriculum. So he's very excited, and our kids are very excited to have that coming in. We do now have a bus radio, which
we haven't had one in the time that I've been at the school, so it's been hard for us to communicate with the bus driver if there was a change or the driver got to a stop and there was no one there to pick up. But now we have a radio where we can communicate with the bus driver, so we're excited to have that. And I also have data to share with you. I have a different format that Craig shared with you. And what I'm sharing with you is the median growth percentile along with the median achievement percentile. And I'll talk a little bit about that. Median growth percentile summarizes student growth percentiles within our school and grade level. And they calculate the median student growth by arranging the scores from lowest to highest, and the middle score is identified as the median. So it's a median growth. Again, we're a very small school, so our numbers are low and our numbers can skew based on the number of students in the cohort. What you'll see here is a comparison of students of how they, based on their spring to fall. So it's cohort to cohort that was calculated in growth. So you'll have math on the top and reading on the bottom. And while I'm up, I'll also share the survey that we shared with families. It's 2 pages. So again, our goals are to increase our student achievement by 20 percentage points of students who are proficient or better. We are working towards those goals. And at data teams, we look at those individual students and see how they're performing. So this is just an overview. So the reason why you see the 46 and the 45 students is because it's based on the cohort that took the assessment. So it didn't include our 6th graders who are now moved on, and it didn't include our kindergarten students from this year because they didn't test in the spring.
Left side of the screen. It's full.
No, so the left side is median growth and the median growth distribution based on the percentage of students that scored in the first to 20th percentile. And then the median achievement is the same students. And it's their achievement score and how they achieve. So some of the things that you'll notice is that, you might see high growth with a certain group of students, but then when you look over in that column of percentage that scored in the 80th percentile or better, it doesn't necessarily match. Kids who are scoring at the highest level, they typically don't grow as much. Their growth band is smaller than students who were really trying to move forward. Those students who are scoring proficient or proficient with distinction, they don't grow as much as students who were really pushing interventions and trying to bring them up to where they need to be. and I'm just looking at the school.
Mhm.
So if we were to look at that very first number that says 51st percentile,
Yes.
that is the median growth of
All students at
that took the test.
Yep.
So it's the growth. And then if we slide over to where it says medium achievement on that same line and it says 53rd, that's so 50.
That's the median achievement.
Right. So that's trying to formulate words. The achievement score is 50. They're in the 53rd percentile, those that are achieving the standard, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then the 15, 18, 28, that would be broken out like Craig's if we had a colorful
Yes.
band.
Yep.
Those, the 15 would be like the blue band here.
Yes.
Ish, right?
Yes.
Okay.
If you're looking at the 80th percentile, so it's in the same progression.
Sorry,
Craig's.
I had that backwards. You're right. So the 15th percentile and the 1st through 20th would be like the red,
Yep.
yellow, green. Well, you guys had orange, yellow.
Orange.
Sorry, ours is different when I look at it, but okay. Thank you.
I should have color coded it.
No, I just needed to orient because this
Yeah,
looks more familiar to me than this.
I didn't know what Craig was going
Yeah.
to present, and this kind of, when I printed that for us, it was on 4 pages,
Right.
and I'm like, well, let's consolidate and put it all in one space.
Thank you. Any questions for Deb? Nothing online?
Nope.
Nope.
Well, I don't think they could see it, so.
Oh, right.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Forgot about that. Sorry.
Yeah, in the future, it would be great to have these handouts included in the board packet.
Yeah. Or we can present a screen if we have one, but
Okay.
next time we'll know. All right. Principal's curriculum.
Okay, I am going to present, Lane, do you mind if I,
Not bad.
the send request? Every time I do this, it's different. Okay. Can you see that? Julie, can you see that? Okay. All right. So, similar to past presentations, I have written a written report, and this is basically the presentation of that written report. And similar to the principals presenting on benchmark data, I am going to present on benchmark data from the TRSU level. So just to call in our 3 SIP goals, continuous improvement goals that the TRSU board adopted in the spring of 24, so in May of 2024. And so we're really here looking at number 1 and 2, which is ELA, reading, and math. And again, those are we're looking at VT CAP assessment data. What I'm going to be presenting on tonight is benchmark data. That's not VT CAP. But I'm going to just give kind of an overview based on what I heard when I presented or shared at the TRSU level to kind of share out what these different assessments mean. So you've seen a slide like this before when Julie and I have presented in the past few years around satellite data, map data, street level data. Satellite data is really district and building level achievement scores. So that was really VT CAP data as well as our NEWA or national, actually what it stands for, but our NEWA benchmark data. And at the 7 through 12, we use IXL diagnostic to also look at benchmark data. And then with that, we also pinpointed at map data. So looking closely at learning trends, pointing at slightly more focused direction towards student and instructional skill gaps. So that benchmark data is really helping us kind of, the VT CAP gives us a broad overview and the benchmark is given 3 times a year to give us more of a clear picture on where we can address certain skill gaps. So this is what we're presenting on now as we just finished the fall benchmark. At the end of, in the middle of October, actually. So we have two different types of assessments. So criterion reference assessments evaluate a student's performance against a fixed set of standards. So in this case, BTCAP data is assessing Common Core state standards in ELA and math. The NEWA test, as well as IXL, as well as BTCAP test those standards. So it's criterion referenced on those. I also said the NGSS standards, so this is the science scores. Norm reference assessments, which NEWA and IXL also is, compare a student's performance to that of a representative peer group. In this case, it's nationally normed to show how they rank related to their peers who also take this test at the national level. So there's two different sets that I think are important that we look at. So in this case, we're looking at NEWA grades K through 6 in math and reading, and 7 through 12 IXL in English language arts and math. Notice the difference. English language arts includes 4 domains, not just reading. So that's speaking, listening, writing, and reading, and NEWA, it's just reading. So math performance. I chose this graph to share with you, and it shows growth. So observed growth exceeded projected growth. So in this case, if you look at the orange rhombus, that is where the projected growth for students at that grade level would perform from fall 2023 to fall 2024 across the country who've taken this test. The observed growth is where TRSU students in grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 have actually achieved based on the fall measure. We already called it fall. So in this case, observed growth preceded projected growth for grades 4 and 5. Observed growth essentially met projected growth for grade 6, and in grades 1 through 3, observed growth was below projected growth. And one of the thoughts about this is, and this came up at the TRSU level as well, the rate of growth for students coming in the primary, like in the K3, is very high. So there is a lot of growth that happens over even from fall to winter, winter to spring. So just something to be mindful of. So there's some good news, and there's some areas to just kind of pay attention to. In terms of achievement, which isn't shown on this graph, but is articulated in my report. So comparing student achievement data, so that's the criterion reference, the standards, from fall 2023 to the current data, the average percentile dropped from 53 percentile to 46 percentile. So that's something that we just want to make sure that it's a slight decline in math, raising concerns about the ability to meet growth. So something that we just want to make sure that we're keeping an eye on. For reading, similarly, the chart shows the aggregate projected growth compared to observed growth in Two Rivers from fall 23 to 24. So observed growth exceeded projected growth for grades 4 and 5. Observed growth essentially met projected growth in grades 3 and 6. And if you recall, we're really looking in grade 3 at, we're looking at an ELA grade 3 as that benchmark or that area where we want to have a skilled reading. And in grades 1 through 2, observed growth was below projected growth. So again, slight below, something to focus on. In terms of achievement, the data showed a decrease in reading achievement with average percentile dropping from the 58th to the 51st percentile. Math performance. So this is IXL diagnostic. It's also a nationally normed assessment. Again, this is given to our 7 through 12 at Green Mountain. So it shows that 20% of students are above the national average, and 64% of students' proficiency is not actually pinpointed. So, which is an area that GM is continually to work on. So it means that we don't have enough data on the majority of students, which could be due to gaps in our in the way that we're having students actually take the test. So that's something.
Jamie sent a question and was asking if we track this data for the tuition students.
Ask the question again.
So do we track the same data for the tuition students? In other words, the students from here that are going off the.
We do not have that, but yeah, we do not have that. And actually, that's a clarification. Maybe I should ask to see about VT cap. I don't remember where we left off with that, but that's something that I can.
So can I just clarify to make sure that I'm understanding the question? Jamie asked if like a seventh grader who goes to Mill River, which is outside of our district, but they might be a Mount Holly resident, we're probably not tracking their data, but the VT cap might be because it gets reported to their home district. So it might be a little bit different. That's.
Hey, Emma, this is Julie. On VT cap, my understanding is that students that we tuition out who go to independent schools do identify us as the sending school, and we're called like the reporting organization, so we can see that data. But students who tuition out to other public schools, that data is not shared with us at the student level. However, we do have access to it once the state releases it at the aggregate level.
So their benchmark data, we do not have access to. So that's something
Yeah, so they're equivalent to IXL or MWEA. We don't, that's internal to their system. We don't get that.
Right. Can I just ask too, while we're already interrupted you, sorry. The gray bar, the one that says other,
not pinpointed.
Right, not pinpointed because kids didn't take it, because they rushed through it, because they're tuitioned and we don't have access, because do we know who makes up that?
All those questions are things that we can ask.
Those kids are all Green Mountain enrolled kids. They are not tuition kids. And the reason they're not pinpointed could be the other reasons you mentioned, Kelly. They rushed through it. They didn't participate. They participated but didn't answer enough questions to get a valid score. There's lots of things that could explain that.
But to your question about Mount Holly, there could be Mount Holly students.
Right, there would be Mount Holly Ludlow students in all of those bars.
If they're at Green Mountain.
Right.
Yeah. So that's math and ELA. Similarly, 10% of students are above the national average. 71% of students' proficiency is not pinpointed. It should be just known that last year was the first year they implemented a screener or this type of assessment at Green Mountain. And ELA was introduced later in the spring. So it's something that they're working on to support students in getting an accurate picture to inform instruction. Okay. So key takeaways. I'm not going to go, I kind of gave you an analysis of this as I was presenting, but in the K6, the average math percentile dropped. I would say that again, 53 from the fall to 46 percentile, and reading proficiency 58th to the 51st. Something that we're just thinking about and considering. I already gave the kind of takeaway from 7 and 12. So next steps, now that we know this, what do we do? I would like to call in that when you look at page 9 and 10 of the Pikers report that Lane shared with the, there are 10 school improvement strategies. We are actually doing quite a few of those. Maybe even 9 out of the 10. So that is a good sign. So these are just a few that we are doing. So focusing on early grade interventions in K3. So looking at exactly where they are, students in those grade bands are, and then doing further diagnostic testing, teachers are to be able to progress monitor what interventions are working and what are not working, adjusting universal instruction in both math and literacy, enhancing data collection and assessment. So that's really that area, GM, making sure we get accurate data and clear pictures of students. Curriculum review and alignment, ensuring that there is some vertical alignment between K6 and 7-12. There isn't some gaps. Consistently building the skills needed to succeed. So in this case, where the curriculum committee is taking a look at the ELA, K6, and then K12 to be able to see if there are any gaps both vertically and horizontally in the grade levels. Targeted interventions and support, specifically in the 7 through 9 at GM, they're focusing on that, and we're using our SPIDIG SSIP grant with the AOE to help support that initiative there. Continuing monitoring adjustments. So we have new to this year, the district leadership team, or the school-based leadership teams that are comprised of each of the principals, as well as 3 to 5 teacher leaders who are kind of leading their school in a distributed leadership kind of model, looking at what we're doing, how we're monitoring growth over time and achievement. Lastly, I wanted to add this wasn't in my report, but this was the Vermont agency released the statewide assessment results for VT-CAP from the fall of 2024. This was a press release that was sent on 9/27, and in that press release, it has tables of kind of how the state had performed at VT-CAP, and so I just took a snapshot of their kind of takeaway there, which is, and it's that report is linked in the slide deck. So the average proficiency, this is again the state level, remains steady compared to the previous year, with the highest in ELA, 54 to 58%, followed by science and then math. Results continue to show significant gaps between students in historically marginalized backgrounds and their peers. And that essentially the tables in the press release that's linked contain the preliminary state results, and they don't think it will change that dramatically. And that the actual results will be released in early winter. So we have access to publicly, so to make instructional decisions, but we can't publicly show that until we release that. And I'm sharing that with you just so you have a sense kind of how the state is performing. So then when we can share those results, you'll have a sense of how we are performing compared to the state. Questions?
Anything online?
I have a question. Can you go back? Sorry, you just took it down. My question was on those 2 bar graphs that showed the growth for K6, and that the language arts and then the math. What might explain? Have you done thinking about what? Oh, am I frozen? No. Have you done thinking about what might explain our results being under the projected growth for 1 and 2 in both subjects?
I think one of the thoughts, the wonderings, is considering it's a fall assessment, fall to fall. The wondering is it due to the rapid rate of growth that occurs between K and 3, and sometimes the consolidation of those skills, given how foundational skills are acquired in students, might not come until later in 2nd or 3rd grade, for instance. And at least when it comes for reading, per se, a lot of those skills, they need the practice and repetition by grade 3. So 2nd grade and 3rd grade will be, actually even for many, the end of 1st grade will be repeated repetition and practice. And so you will not see those results until the end of that grade. But that's just a wondering that could also be indicating that there's a gap there.
Did any of the schools change to multi-grade between the first administration and the second administration across the district?
Did everyone hear Lane's question? So let me think.
Because I wasn't here.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. Good question. I'm just thinking. I do not believe so. I think that multi-grade had started in 3 out of the 4 elementary schools at the beginning of 2022.
So the first data would have been after a year of multi-grade. The second data would have been, second set would have been after 2 years.
That's right.
Because the wondering would be, is that decline because you're seeing a multi-year impact of multi-grade?
That could be too. Yeah.
Research is pretty strong on multi-grade impact. So it doesn't mean that has anything to do with this. It's just, it's investigating.
Yeah.
Is the projected growth diamond rhombus? I struggle with words at night. It's not projected growth that those kids, the bar is their fall score and their projected growth is what we would expect by June. It is their where they are and where we would expect them to be based on their previous scores and previous, okay, yes.
And this is just another one that it'd actually be fun to kind of figure out. I've never seen a district, and it doesn't mean they don't exist, where ELA is lower than that. It's usually the other way around significantly. So that's worth figure out. It's just kind of interesting.
Where
And
ELA,
you're wondering
you don't see ELA lower than math?
Yeah, usually, if you look at math, science, and ELA, it's usually ELA, they're way up here. Math is a little bit lower, and science is usually bringing up the rear. Is the usual. I've never seen the ELA and the math swap.
Well, I would also say that some of the research says about the adoption. Julie, did we answer your question? One of the
Yes, thank you.
Some of the research says about the adoption of a content-based ELA curriculum is that you will see it will take a longer time to see in the results because you're developing research in the equity of developing the background knowledge instead of so the vocabulary, the language, the writing versus some other kind of more standardized programs. So it's a different approach to literacy instruction that they've seen with the implementation of these types of curriculums.
Take a few years.
It can take upwards of 5 years to see, and often we've spoken about this before, you will see an implementation dip because teachers are letting go of practices and learning new ones. So that's just something to be aware of. As well as, I think, really critically looking at how we're teaching those foundational skills in reading as well, like balancing time on that.
Thank you. Boiler. It's a good time. There's time. No Todd on the boiler. Craig, is that going to be you?
Oh no, Todd is. We're up to the boiler update.
Yeah.
Todd's on a well-earned vacation.
Oh.
After the athletic director duties and the kids, winning the soccer championship. So the boiler update here it's up and running and you can feel the heat.
That's what I was saying. It's warm.
Cheryl, was working on the projected budget, which we'll touch on a little bit later, but she's already predicting a $12,000 savings because of switching, just to switch from more. Actually, so
12,000.
Yeah.
All right. And that brings us to you, Sharon.
So I'm going to be brief and then we'll get into budget. Because tis the season. So you have October in the folder. The one thing I want to point out is that in Mount Holly, we did add, it's a 0.1 FTE, I believe, Craig, for the mental health portion.
Correct.
Based on some needs for the school in general. And so we added that to the budget, not added to the budget, we added that position. We'll budget for this year, but it'll deficit on those budget lines. I have all of the audits on my desk. I have to review them now, which is another whole process because now I get to audit the audit.
The auditors did.
So that's another whole process. And the service plan was submitted yesterday. So that's for FY26. So we're constantly working in the future and I got to go back to the audits for last year. So Wayne's going to present on the budget. Keep in mind, this is round one. And there's lots of discussion still to be had on it, but this is where we are at that point. The December 1st letter will be coming out on or about December 1st. That will be weekend this year. And that will guide us to a lot of the finalizing of where we are. I did have, information about, the projected cap and how that's gonna be the word current. What the formula that they gave us to project the excess spending cap.
They gave us something?
Well, this is what they gave us in July.
Yeah.
What they gave us in July, we're currently under.
So we'll talk a little bit about spending, and especially because, part of tonight will be a presentation separately on, coming in about what a potential bond, or can we work it into the regular budget and pay it off in one shot. So we talk about that. So that's actually good news. How much under?
I think they're like 252,000 under.
Awesome. Okay.
Not a great deal of money, but still under. You really want to tickle that. Yeah.
So a couple of things that I like to do when we're stepping into a budget season is try to get people's mood. Let me see if I can actually get this thing. That's fine. And that's kind of what's happening in terms of the financial landscape right now. So in terms of the mood that people are in, everybody remembers last year, right? The historic kind of tax hikes that people experienced. You went through multiple rounds of trying to pass your budget, so that'll still be on people's minds. We talked a little bit about the second bullet there, that the state was predicting this summer that if every district stayed level funded, there would still be a 7% increase in terms of taxes this year. And then the last piece that we've got the unknowns of a new federal administration that's coming in, who is looking at cutting the Department of Education, and has talked about cutting some of the grants that we also receive, like Title. And so we don't know where any of those things end up. We can probably predict a little bit about where people's mood is around taxes and education funding at this point in time. When we're looking at any of the budgets across TRSU, whether it's Ludlow-Mount Holly or Green Mountain or the TRSU budget, the first thing that we've got to do is make sure that we're putting enough money aside to meet the mandatory requirements. Right? We've got requirements in terms of the contracts that we have, like we've got agreements with the teachers about what salary increases would be. We have our utilities that we have to pay. We've got special education that we need to pay, and so those are mandatory. We've got to do it. The more discretionary piece that we have in the budget is really around supporting the continuous improvement plan goals and student success. And so we'll talk a little bit about that as we kind of go through. We touched on this a little earlier, and it's going to be important to how we're kind of transitioning over the next couple of years in terms of budget discussions. So we're in this piloting mode of a new teacher evaluation process, right? The teachers are going to develop goals that support what the district is trying to accomplish on behalf of kids. They're going to pick objective data to be able to track their progress towards meeting their personal goals. And then at the same time, if they're doing things that are ambitious and saying, I want to get my kids by the end of the year performing, 20 or 30 points higher in terms of how many are reaching proficiency compared to last year, they might have some budgetary requirements for that. I want to invest in this program because I think it will help. This is the type of support we need. These are the type of resources. So it's really about getting them to communicate their budget needs, because the budget is probably the main tool through which we are able to achieve the things that we achieve within a district. Budget process for the three boards and the two districts. At the top of the pyramid, you have the goals that come from the school board. They trickle down to the staff that are at the bottom of the pyramid. They're the ones that are doing the actual work trying to achieve those goals, which is why that new evaluation process is so important. And then their job is to communicate upwards what they need in terms of budgetary resources to be able to accomplish what they're doing. And so we're trying to make a bit of a transition to a bottom-up budgeting process. They're doing the work. They should be able to communicate to us what they need. We should be able, as the people that have oversight, should be able to tell if what they're saying is reasonable, and judge based upon that. And Cheryl, correct me if any of these parts and pieces are wrong, but in terms of expenses, these are some of the major changes that are happening. There was an 11.9% increase in terms of health insurance. So that equates to a $63,333 increase for what we'll be paying for health insurance for staff next year. $3,000 for the Read 180 program, which I believe is a literacy intervention program. Right, we're talking about resources for students and goals. $190,000 increase in paying for 7 to 12 tuition. $310,000 increase that's due to the supervisory union, the TRSU assessment. So that covers central office, that covers changes in transportation, and the biggest piece of this is changes in special education. That is the largest chunk. $5,000 increase in property insurance, $15,000 to replace aging technology in the Ludlow-Mount Holly district. We're also entering into a negotiation year with the teachers union. Right now, if negotiations do not end before the boards vote on their budgets in January, we have to predict where we think things are going to land. So that's our prediction. We're going to need about 91,000 of an increase to be able to cover, what will come out of negotiation. The board seemed interested in the equality between the two schools, between Ludlow and Mount Holly. So the 212,000 would cover 2 full-time teachers to be able to make sure that the staffing equality is there, given the students in multi-grade. And then there was what we were just talking about, the $12,000, $13,000 decrease because of the switching over to propane. There was some changes that you had in there for grants as well, which I left out. I think it was about $6,000 savings. But you're looking at a total of about $877,000 in a draft budget as an increase for next year.
So just to elaborate that estimation, the 90,000 includes non-bargaining. What we're also negotiating on this side with support staff.
Yeah, which is good. Yeah, I keep forgetting that the support staff are split. Questions, thoughts?
So our total budget was 10 million more or less?
I think so. Around 9 to 10. Yeah.
Okay, so this would be about a 9% increase.
10.14? Say on my memory, yes.
10.14.
Right, so 8.5% roughly increase year to year.
Yep. Yeah. They got to get the education funding on the street now.
And so do you have any sense of what's going to happen to our pupil count year to year? I think we had big 6th grades, but they're still included. And that's why the tuition is going up so much.
The numbers to look at are the 12th graders that are graduating and moving on, and the kindergarten classes that are coming in.
And do you know how those are going to expect them to play out?
You guys are probably making better.
Who knows about the 12th graders?
I've looked at the enrollments across 4 or 5 years. I don't have the most recent years from the state of Vermont yet because they're behind on the data, as we know. But the populations, they bounce up and down, but the trend lines are steady, if that helps. And that's true across both districts.
And it's true across the state, correct?
Pretty close, yeah. So you get this jumping up and down, but over the course of time, it's just a steady state.
And I just want to clarify, Julie's got her hand up. Can I just ask this real quick, Julie, and then I'll come over? Sorry, I really had trouble saying it. 190,000 increase in tuition is a big 6th grade class from from Mount Holly.
Tuitions went up.
But it's not, right, tuition goes up. And also, is it kids that have moved into our district in grade 7 through 12 since our budget closed a year ago?
I'd have to go back and look at what that detail
Yeah.
looked like. I'm budgeting for 133 students, 91 of them going to public school, and 42 of them going to a private independent school. So that is part of that report, is to keep those public dollars in public education and not take them out of the system, because as a statewide tax system, when you're putting it back into other public schools, it's really helping us out as opposed to it going out to independent schools.
That's a good point. That was another piece of when we're talking about where the money from the ed fund is going. There's been an increasing drain on the ed fund to pay tuition to private schools. That takes it out of the hands of public schools to be able to have use. A lot of the private schools, they've not held the same accountability standards, not necessarily held the quality standards.
So they forced us to close and send our kids places and pay tuition to places that is now costing us more money and not saving us our tuition.
Here's your ed fund, right? Here's a chunk that's paying for universal. Here's a chunk they're taking out to pay for retirement. Here's a big chunk they're taking out to pay for private schools. So if everything that you put in that was supposed to go to education, public, that's what you're getting. And so that was one of the reasons that they made that recommendation in the report, was to stop using it for other things. So yeah, I forgot about that. That's a good one to bring up.
Julie and Jamie both have their hand up.
Sorry about that.
Julie and
Yeah, I can't see here, so.
Thanks. I just have a couple of questions. The 2 FTEs in Ludlow to address the equity issue. Can you explain what that means operationally? What are those 2 FTEs and how do you plan to deploy them in the classrooms?
Sure. So the 2 FTE would be going back to single grades at Ludlow Elementary School. So having a single kinder, single first grade, single second grade, and so on, so that each grade is 1 grade level. That will also help reduce our class sizes.
Got it. Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, Julie, Mount Holly would follow the same format, but we wouldn't require our current staff would make that possible.
Wait, I'm sorry. Did you just say that you're going to go back to single grade classrooms?
I think if we're trying to be consistent in both campuses, because we're really one school with 2 campuses, that's a pretty major
shift.
That's we're not consistent with that, then we're not being very consistent.
Oh, so if I'm hearing what you're saying, you're thinking about or tentatively intending to go back to single grade in both schools.
Correct.
Okay. Sorry.
We've had discussions about it. And a lot of the reason is if you look at the research that's pretty clear on multi-grade is that academics tend to suffer. Social development tends to improve. But if we've got a CIP that is requiring academic achievement and academic improvement, it seems like we should be creating structures that support the CIP. It is a structure that historically does not support academic achievement on average, not in all cases.
I would just say that however you operationalize all of this is, I think you guys are awesome and I trust you, but I would just say that if you go back to, if you sort of change the paradigm of how the operation is structured, I would just advocate for teacher support in changing from the multi-grade back to single grade, only because I have heard from teachers who have approached me about the fact that when, at least at Ludlow, the school went from single grade to multi-grade, I think some folks felt like there wasn't a lot of support for shifting to, what is essentially like a different model. And so if you now, after a few years of multi-grade, go back to single grade, I just think it's important to make sure that employees feel supported in that transition. And
like I said, it's been a discussion. But, a couple of thoughts. I think we had the discussion here as well at the last. You've got teachers, especially at the elementary level, that teach multiple subjects, right? Because they're generalists in terms of the students. So they've got a pretty big workload there. If you have a single teacher that's teaching 2 grades, you've now doubled the workload. They're differentiating for the students in the class because all the students have different learning needs. Now you're differentiating the learning needs between 2 different grades. So it's another burden on top of the teacher. So it adds up to quite a bit in terms of, what the teacher is able to do to make sure that each student is properly prepared. But,
I just wanted to add.
Somebody wanted to add to Julie's question.
Oh, sorry about that.
Who it is.
Yeah,
I was just going to say that part of I think the conversation was taking the teacher feedback that going back to straight grades would be helpful.
Yes. And do we have our personal school data that supports that?
Well, as Lane said, we're just at the beginning of having conversations about that, getting feedback from teachers. We have more work to do. What I was trying to clarify is that if Ludlow is thinking of a budget approach like this that could allow for single grade, and there seems to be some initial support for that from the teaching staff, it would just make sense to do it the same way. We could use the structure we have in Mount Holly with the current staffing to keep a standalone K, 2 1-2s, 2 3-4s, 2 5-6. So it didn't need to give the impression that this is happening. We're just at very beginning stages, but we want to at least put on the table that if Ludlow's going to try to do that, we should at least be considering it for Mount Holly as well.
And if we were going to stay with the multi-grade, that would allow us to split our larger class sizes into 2 smaller groups.
I just think that we've been told for a few years that the data nationally was more neutral and that we were seeing positive results in Mount Holly because Mount Holly's been doing it longer, and Ludlow shifted based on, and we all know you can make statistics say whatever you want. I get that. So to hear tonight, we're going to switch because the data doesn't say that. And we've not looked at the data personally because we can't. And so I think it would be really important for us to hear.
And too, Kelly, so our class sizes are almost double what Mount Holly's class sizes are in our multi-grade. Right. So whether or not we go back to a single grade or we split our classrooms, either way, we would lower our class size numbers, which ultimately we would hope would increase our the learning for us.
I don't have a problem either way. I just think we need to have the data to support the decision. And if we hire 2 people and they teach all 7 grades, that doesn't matter to me. I care that what we're doing makes sense from a data standpoint from our data set, not New York City's data set, because it's not going to be the same. Yeah. And I think Jamie still had a question.
Yeah, I can't see everybody who had a hand up.
Julie.
So I have a question about, and I don't know if Mount Holly, but yes, we did the multi-grade classrooms, but do we have the actual curriculum to support that? Because I've heard some things, and it sounds like we don't have that curriculum.
We do have curriculum to support that right now in our EL modules, and each multi-grade classroom they're teaching 2 modules from 1 grade level curriculum and 2 modules from the 2nd grade curriculum. There are 4 modules for each grade level. So in a cycle of being in a multi-grade classroom for 2 years, they're experiencing 8 modules in the EL curriculum at different levels. So some of the work is more difficult and the teachers have to differentiate based on the standards. So in a 3rd grade classroom, they'll do 2 3rd grade modules, 2 4th grade modules, and the multi-grade teacher is then differentiating up and down based on the modules that they're teaching with the whole class of 3rd graders and 4th graders. So there are some standards, for example, in 4th grade that are not 3rd grade standards. So the classroom teacher then has to adjust how she teaches and how she assesses with the 3rd graders and the 4th graders. So to Lane's point, it's giving that teacher twice as much work, even though they're teaching the 4 modules. Within those modules, they then have to plan for how they're going to work with 3rd graders, because not all of the 3rd grade standards are in the 4th grade, and not all the 4th grade standards are within the 3rd grade modules. So it becomes this balancing act.
That sounds complicated.
Very.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things is you've got one school who already has the staff to be able to do that if it's available. Yeah. So it's interesting. Are there other?
I had one more question about the Read 180 program. Is that new for both schools?
So that's something we just started piloting last spring in grades 3 through 6 in Mount Holly. We used some grant money that we had, and it's a tier 3 intervention. So it's specifically geared to students who are on IEPs and are well below the grade level standard. And it complements the Wilson program that we've been using. It's a little early to say, as Kelly's saying, with like definitive data that it's working. So I'm not gonna go that far, but the initial months last spring and then again this fall, the level of student engagement is remarkably high. The materials, sometimes when you're dealing particularly with upper grade students who are really struggling to learn of learning disabilities, it can feel to them like the books and materials are below their developmental level. And these have a really much more mature and engaging set of topics and formats, and the feedback we're getting from kids. We've gone from where I'm observing teaching sessions where kids are like reluctant to take a turn reading in, say, a small group, to clamoring, can I go next? Can I go next? So it's a real difference. And this was something that the person who was subbing long-term last year for Beth Chase, Ellen Casano, had used down at UPenn and gotten really strong results with over a multi-year period. And the literature and the research on the program is also very strong. So
I used it about 20 years ago. It was the same thing. We found it very engaging for kids who struggled.
Yeah.
And the material meets that high interest, low reading level in a lot of novels and material that isn't consumable year to year, but can be kept. And so it's also a little bit budget friendly.
Yeah. And we were really fortunate because Ellen, her success with her students down in Pennsylvania was so strong. She got a national recognition for that. And they gave her like a $6,000 library of all of these materials, the books themselves, and she donated them to us. So the other supplemental materials are pretty affordable. That's why we're able to do it at that rate. So I think by the end of this year, we'll have some better data to really evaluate it.
My recollection from the presentation on class sizes and staffing that we got in September was that even though the lower grades in Ludlow were mistreated in effect or understaffed, right? That the overall teacher to student ratio was very similar at the two schools. And as part of that was because of the math teacher, right, that Ludlow has and that Mount Holly doesn't. I guess partly it'll change partly just because Mount Holly had more kids than Ludlow did, the sixth grade moving on. And I wonder if we could get a table like that for what you think it'll be next year. Okay? And of course, the other advantage of the multi-grade was when you had a huge sixth grade and a small fifth grade, right? It was easier to deal with, right?
Yeah.
But it looked like that in many of the grades now, they're more similar numbers in each grade. I didn't see a huge third grade and a small fourth grade or anything like that.
That is.
But anyway, I think a table like that would be helpful next time to help us understand what we're really proposing and whether we need two teachers or two new FTEs or whether one FTE, if the math teacher could maybe be, anyway, shuffle things around and just to see what the overall ratios at the two schools would look like.
Yeah. Yeah, your recollection is accurate, Dave, and that's partly what's driving some of these initial conversations about the pros and cons of single grade versus multi-age. Because the bubble for Mount Holly is graduating and the projections are, much more even over the next several years.
So kind of the last piece to roll up, and this is where Cheryl can correct me if I'm wrong, because surplus and reserves, they're funny when you talk about them. You're kind of talking across 2 to 3 budget years in terms of how this works. Surplus is what is left at the end of a budget year. It's left over. What ends up happening with it is that you can make a few decisions. The district can decide to roll it into the next year to help subsidize taxes, to bring taxes down for folks, or they can vote to put it into a reserve fund for a future use. And so it looks like the last cycle, there was 679,000. 497,000 of it was rolled into the current budget that we're in right now that helped kind of subsidize taxes a little bit. So that means there's 181,000 that is sitting there that we're going to have to decide what to do with. And so you've got some options here when the time comes is you can roll it over, right, to subsidize taxes for next year. You can put it out to vote to try to put it into a reserve fund for future spending. Or a combination of the two. So we're just throwing the numbers out there so the board's aware.
Does that mean in addition to the almost 900,000 increase in spending, we're not going to have 500,000 of bringing in from the prior year?
So that's on the revenue side. So it's not going to change your expenses.
Right. But if we're looking at
state support grant, which we raise taxes on.
Right. And so that the taxes might have to go up by the $1.4 million. Is that right? By the 500 plus the 900.
So yeah, when you subsidize, you're building in an eventual cliff year, usually, right? Because if I need 1.5 million to run the district this year, and 500,000 of it is subsidized, right? It's coming from the previous year, not from the taxpayers. If the next year comes and I don't have that 500,000, I got to get it from the taxpayers to get back to the same level.
And so after we have the December 1st letter, will you be able to say what the draft budget would mean, at least an estimate for taxes? I understand last year a lot changed after December 1st,
well,
but usually.
Yes, but we also have to wait for the long-term weighted membership. So
that's new again.
Right, but
they've been working hard this year, and they seem to have more of their ducks in a row. So I'm hoping that we'll get it in the final budget.
Okay. Yes.
No, it's good. Yeah, because it does come down to being able to take a look at what the potential tax impact is. And again, this is draft budget. This is what we're talking about at this point in time in terms of if we want to try to reach the goals that have been set, this is what people are saying they need. And so again, the board has final decision. It's nice to get what you asked for, but we also recognize that we'll do what we have to kind of muddle through what we get. So I think that's important for folks to know.
This budget does maintain the 350,000 that we had previously put into capital reserve so that we can continue to build that.
Okay. So is this presentation on the website?
Can be.
It can be, and I think it would be useful to be able to either email it to us or post a link to it. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff there. But I
got to remember to convert it to Google because I use Microsoft Office. So when I send it out, if I don't do that, people can't read it.
Well, most people can read it. I mean, if you just send us an attachment, we can
So
probably all
David,
read
in
it.
the folder with the budget is my list that I had given to Lane that he took that information on.
Oh, okay.
If you don't get that presentation back.
Yeah, no, just to try to be able to
It's
throw it up
prettier.
on the board. Yeah.
All right, so we're plugging along budget-wise. And that's kind of it at the moment. We're moving.
It's all drafted.
Yeah. Old business policies for a second read. F28 wellness policy, Federal Child Nutrition Act and nutrition. B8 electronic communication between employees and students. And F3 fire and emergency preparedness drills. I believe these were all
mandatory.
They're all mandatory, and I think they were all just read at TRSU as well and accepted, right? Any questions about the three of those? I would look for a motion then to adopt F28, B8, and F3.
So move.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Thank you. All right. Any further discussion about those three policies? So all those in favor of approving F28, B8, and F3, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Anybody opposed? Very good. They are approved. Thank you. So we have new, no, I'm just kidding. Sorry. Review reserve funds spent, Mount Holly School.
I think, and both of us can kind of touch on this. I think this was in reference to the board had approved up to $35,000 to repair the roof. They did the roof repairs, and both of us, in terms of recollection, it was about $3,800 that they haven't got the bill yet. So it came in well under what we were thinking. They were originally thinking around $10,000. So that's good.
And this was to get us through the winter, safe, it's solid. We talked about making sure we weren't spending good money after bad. And
They did a nice job.
The electrical came in less. I think Todd was projecting about 10,000 and it came in at 6,060. And we paid EEI and they keep a retainer for everything. Instead, we have 13,000 left to pay for them, but it'd be 268.
So how much is left now from the capital? Roughly?
Not counting the last 13,000 or the roof repair, so we don't have it. Once we move the transfer into the general fund, it will be 193,213. We'll have to pay those two bills, so we've got 180. That 185 we'll have left after we pay all the bills.
And presentation about the bonds.
So this was a request from the board about if we were going to go out for a bond, what should we prioritize? And so we had talked about three basic categories, right? Critical infrastructure, those things that if we don't take care of them, we might have a catastrophic problem on our hands that's unexpected. We also talked about making sure that we've done the work to be in compliance with the Americans with Disability Act. And we talked about some efficiency improvements, especially because it might allow us to tap into, if we go out to bond, to a lower rate for the bond. Mount Holly, if we take a look at those costs, and EEI did actually go back and relook at them. So this is updated data. For the roof replacement in Mount Holly, you're talking $335,000, $122,000 to get in compliance with the ADA requirements, and then $77,000 for the LED lighting in this building to change over, and that also includes fixing the lights in the gym. So it would be a total of $534,000 to get that work done in Mount Holly. So questions on Mount Holly before we take a look at Ludlow? Yeah, and this is the one where the roof is like really, really good. Ludlow Elementary roof replacement actually came in a little bit less than the first estimate I saw when I started here. $960,000 to bring it up to ADA compliance is $205,000, and then to do the efficiency work by replacing the lights there with LEDs, that would be $189,000. And then they have a couple of classrooms on one side that's facing the playground that they really need the windows to be replaced. So $95,000 to do that work. So you're looking at a total of $1.4 million to do the pretty much the necessary work at Ludlow Elementary. So total, and we'll talk about the different possibilities. Total for budget or total for bond. You're talking about $1.9 million total for the two schools across the entire district. We had talked a little bit about. It might be possible, given the education funding system, the way it is right, because everybody is paying for it, to try to do that $1.9 million in 1 year, just add it to the budget, make sure that people are aware, and when the numbers come in, we might be able to go out and say, yeah, everybody's going to pay an extra $100 this year, but this is what it's going to solve, and it's one time, it's one and done. We won't be able to calculate that until, probably we get to December 1st and probably a little bit later what the impact is. But we also need to know what that excess spending threshold. So the budget option means, trying to go for it in one shot in the upcoming budget. But it's only worth considering if it doesn't push us over the excess spending threshold. There's a hybrid possibility as well. The benefit of it is it's one and done. There would be on a 2% bond for 15 years. The interest would be about $314,000. So that would be a savings over those 15 years. I was messing around, but Cheryl had better numbers than I did when I was looking up what the general rate is if we don't qualify for the efficiency part of it. It's about 3.33%, not the 7%. So you're talking at a regular rate for a bond. If we don't get the efficiency piece, you're talking about $600,000 in interest. About half of what's there. Nice part is it's paid by all taxpayers in Vermont, and it would avoid having to have two separate votes, one for the budget and then going back for a second round of the bond. Other option is the bond option, right? You take out the loan. It's like kind of buying a house. It allows you to pay over time, but you've got to pay the interest for it. And so those costs can add up. The nice part about the bond, though, is that the impact on a budget is small. Right? It's a lot smaller than trying to do it all at once. In most cases, you cannot pay off bonds early if you were to come into a windfall and try to avoid some of the interest on it. You can't do that. And a bond is going to require us going out to the board. We know last year was kind of difficult to obtain. But we're asking for, it looks like, significantly less than was up for last year. There's also a hybrid option, is that if we got 1.9 million, we put as much of it into the budget as we can to push things right up to that excess spending threshold. So we get to take advantage of those benefits, and then what's left over is we seek a short-term bond, which would reduce interest. And So I don't know if there's questions on that. Or,
Can you go back 2 slides?
yeah.
When we say that it's paid for by all taxpayers, I understand what you mean. But my question is, we would pay for it in 1 year. We would get, it would be spread out amongst all of the taxpayers. If we did it in a bond, the same would happen next year and next year and next year. We just wouldn't see the big.
Unless they change the education funding, which is quite possible over the course of 15 years.
Right.
Yeah, so really good observation. Yeah. But,
Say that again?
so it would still come from all taxpayers if we were paying a bond, but the problem is they're trying to change the education funding formula. So a couple of years down the road, it may not.
So all of the taxpayers are helping us, and so we'll keep it at $100 this year. If we did a bond and we paid for it over the next 15 years and the formula stayed the same, they're still sort of helping. It's just like
we're asking for a little bit more.
That amount of money changes drastically, but the concept is still there.
Yeah.
For now.
Yeah, but if they change the education funding formula, which is their goal,
right?
You know, you could be 3 years into the bond, and all of a sudden, now, you know, I don't think they could do this with the Supreme Court ruling that they had, but you know, if you got back and they said, well, all towns have to pay for their own.
Well, and we're committed to it. It would almost be like buying a house and then 2 or 3 years in getting fired from your job.
Yep.
And you still owe that money. And if the formula changes and you can't find that money, yeah.
So that's the concern. So that was one of the reasons of kind of really talking about the budget option if it was possible, because we don't know. And it's leveraging, you know, the system that's currently there to try to get the maximum gain from it. That's what happened to everybody here last year is the other districts did what they needed to. Some of them leveraged the system, and we all ended up paying for it while your taxes went up even though they were cuts, as well as real estate prices going up as well.
So we're not.
No, just a discussion.
Yeah.
Well, so hopefully by next month, Cheryl, could you give us numbers saying, or if we did it all, you know, all at once, here's how much the tax hit would be, and if we did it,
the other information, yes.
Yeah.
December 1st letter, hopefully.
Right. That if it's right, because I mean, it seems off the top of my head, it seems like if we can get a 2% loan, right, then we're talking about, and it's a 10-year loan, $200,000 a year in principal and $40,000 beginning the first year in interest that would gradually go down, and that's seems like it's going to be might be a lot easier to sell than to say, all right, we're going to spend an extra $2 million.
The other thing you could do is take a chance, see if people go for it, and then if the budget fails, you just pull it out and revote the budget.
So there's another, it's renewable energy loan program. It's 2.1% interest over 10 years. And so the projects have to qualify. They have to have a certain percentage of energy savings. And when they spoke to the bond bank about it, I think it was just the lighting.
Maybe the windows.
The LED. Well, he said it depended on what the numbers came out. So once we decide we're going to do this and we get more numbers that have the information behind it and say what the energy savings is, there may be more that would qualify under that loan for that loan.
And I thought Eric suggested that the roof replacement in Ludlow might qualify.
Well, what I sent to them for information was a pretty generic matrix that really didn't have information. So I think if you could show that, but it may be like splitting it up.
Yeah, a part of that may be the case because the water has damaged the insulation in there, and part of it's replacing the insulation and upgrading it.
So if Eric, if he could do more, give us a little more on that one.
Yeah.
He probably knows what they need.
Right.
So we have 2 vacant board seats and 2 people who have asked to join. Katie and Katie. And so Katie Benson did email me earlier and say she was still very interested. Unfortunately, she had an appointment from before there was this opportunity and she couldn't change it. So she's still very interested and would like us to consider her. I did not get a chance to ask her if she had gone to the select board. I feel like she has.
One did. We actually reached out to the select board and didn't hear back. And so I think one of them just showed up. And the board did send a letter saying, yeah, we support it.
Okay.
I think that was Katie Klitschkowski from Mount Holly.
So Katie from Mount Holly has the approval from the select board, but we have not heard back from.
Yeah, and the select board, we fulfilled our requirement. It's to offer them the ability to have input.
Okay.
And so when we asked to be put on the agenda and we did not get a response, they had the opportunity for the input.
Okay.
But it's this board that is the decider.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And we received letters from both of them. Does anybody have any comment or concern or thoughts about appointing them tonight in their absence? Because neither of them are here, and I didn't hear from Katie from Mount Holly.
My understanding is she's very much interested. She went to the select board meeting.
Okay.
I talked to them both too. They were excited. There were a lot of them to talk to.
Yeah. I mean, I know Katie Benson, but I don't know the other one at all, so.
I think Dave Venter was going to speak in favor of
Katie.
Mount Holly
Yeah.
Katie.
Right.
Mount Holly Katie, yeah. And Katie Klitschkowski's got a couple of kids here in the school and one that just graduated. She's very engaged and supportive parent.
So then I guess not hearing any other thoughts or concerns, we can go ahead and do a motion to approve, I guess officially Caitlin Benson and Katie Kilchowski.
Also move.
Thank you. Anybody second? Looks like Jamie might have seconded. All those in favor then of appointing Katie and Katie? Aye. Anybody opposed? Thank you.
I'll let them know.
And
get them sworn in.
I was going to say the next step would be to be sworn in. So if we had any emergency issues, they could jump right on board. Annual report.
Well, we may have covered that. That was really,
too, but maybe that was at TRSU. So
deciding who's going to write it from on the board side.
Yeah. Great.
There's the thing that I can
she doesn't have
offer
enough going on.
is there are a couple of folks out there that can do the write-up. And they don't charge a heck of a lot to do it. If you can give them the basic facts, they're kind of PR specialists and they'll write it up for you. You read over it. If you don't like parts of it, you can always change it.
I mean, I don't mind coming up with a little something for our December meeting and I mean, I think.
Yeah, usually the board piece is just explaining the good things that happened, over the last year, the good work that we've done.
And if people have thoughts about what should go in it, I would certainly entertain those thoughts and I'll put something together. And then maybe Julie, because you're good with the words, you could help wordsmith it and whatnot. All right. And then TRSU board report, we had a short meeting. I don't think there was anything drastic or
most of the same thing here. We talked about budget.
Right, budget, a little bit of policy governance, policies, same thing. So not much to report on. Policy committee, I don't think we're still kind of shy in the committee thing. So we'll have to get that done in December when we have a full board, hopefully. And then facilities committee, we did not meet, but I think the report about the roof, the boiler, and the possible bond / put it in the budget covers that.
Kelly,
Yes.
Can you add to the agenda for the December meeting, just reviewing the board committee assignments in light of the new members?
Yeah. Policies approved at this meeting, F28, B8, and F3 were approved. And public comments. I think he commented by leaving. Is he the only public we have? Is there anybody else?
Actually, I have a question. Sorry,
Yeah.
I just thought of it. The two board members who we just, who just joined, what is the length of their term? Do they have to run again in a couple of months, or is it one full year? How does that work?
They will have to run again in March.
Oh,
So
okay.
They'll need to, so how it works is they'll fill out, and I think this is for you too, right? So you'll get your petition, you'll get some signatures by the mid to end of January. They will then get voted on in March from that petition, and they will fill out, from that point, they will fill out the remainder of the term that was vacant. And I don't have that in front of me.
I think it says 26.
26, thank you.
For both of them, I think. So it's-
Okay. Yeah, 26 on both of them. Dave is 26, 26. Yes, so they'll sign a petition, get elected in March, and then have to do it again 1 year later.
Whereas Jan, yours will be, it looks like for a 3-year. Right?
Okay.
Right? Because the term would end in this March anyway.
Right. Then how many signatures do I have to get?
It depends on the voter checklist, and I don't know for the off time.
Ask the town clerk.
Yeah.
I think it's something like 35. I may be making that.
And I'm not sure, and I should know this, but don't we all have we're not all 3-year terms, right? Some of us are 1s and 3s.
No,
Yeah.
I think they're
No, we're all three.
We're all 3s now.
Ludlow's has gotten out of whack because there's nobody on for 27. So that not everybody's getting off the board at the same time.
Right.
There should be a rotation. But
Right.
something happened at one point.
Okay.
I thought in Mount Holly 2 go up every time. So it's like 3.
I don't know. At one point, we had some that were 1-year terms and some that were 3. And so, but and that won't matter at the moment anyways. So,
I can see if we get what the records say.
yeah.
In the Articles of Agreement, I think it was 2018.
Next regular meeting will be December 11th at 6 in Ludlow. That was a big confusion this afternoon.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I don't know where you saw that, but I didn't see it, thank goodness. I would have really panicked.
Okay.
Unless we get called for something else. And board self-evaluation. Board members are given and have read the agenda and background materials prior to the meeting. We did talk about having any data sets ahead if we can. Board members are respectful of each other, the public, and the administration. And board members handle conflict openly and constructively. They were amazing. Board members focus on the role and responsibility of the board. Lovely. Board members act as a team. Once a decision has been made, and then we work collaboratively throughout the decision-making process. Favorite time of the night? Motion to adjourn. Someone motion to adjourn.
I'll move that.
Thank you. Someone second it. All those in favor? Anybody opposed? All right. Thank you, everybody.